for the any come over on the social want to how say GH politics avenue. Political stories are trending because making headlines and the January now it be Akroma and the young Broxium say NFAD can you message to subscribe to the channel, hit notification bell, share now for front so and start into me and can be mammy info in a political highways in so now NPP delegate conference at a bar so no can say NPP mpanyinfo ahodo na omotimi ebowure mo ho na dodo na itimi ekasai inya access on the big stage platform so itimi echo mabin efa party no na uhwe ya Canada Japan ntimi anya access to it.
Put out the negatives of this government more effectively. You'll be able to communicate more effectively to, influence voter decision going forward.
We can. We will be able.
All right.
Also, the party machinery is being
more efficient.
Yes, we're more efficient.
Okay. The one concern emerged about how the conference was actually organized and how other interest groups within the party were handled. And so I'm bringing in Kwesi Kwatin. He speaks for the Kennedy Japan team. If you're on the line, you have issued a statement and you said that the organizers of the conference have quote and unquote painted, let me get the actual word you use, staged, where is it? I'm not finding it. But what really is your concern about the way the conference was organized?
Thank you very much, and good evening to you, and good evening to my deputy hardworking general secretary. I must commend the team. They've done a yeoman's job in terms of the organization, in terms of the security. So far, so good. We're all there to help, of course, particularly within the areas that we are also good at, and in my case, specifically communication. In terms of even the general outlook of the event, I must say that it went so well, very good branding, and we must all take credit for that. But of course, I mean, in as much as a party, we organize this to strengthen the party as a whole. I think it's also important that we take some good feedback so that in other organizations, it can also help us to improve.
Right.
I think my concern was not necessarily a concern for myself, but I mean, bottom line is that platforms like this and events like this are very necessary to forge unity among party members, especially with key party stakeholders. And so if you had also maybe listened to the grounds, particularly amongst most of the delegates, the conversation was also as though some way, somehow, some hopefuls, and I use hopeful because as of now, we have aspirants yet, not to even have candidates yet, were more or less giving an upper step or an added advantage to project themselves. I mean, it is undisputed fact that, for instance, if you look at, say, Dr. Bawumia, he was our former vice president, and I mean, accordingly, you would accord him with such courtesies, privileges, and respect. But when concerns are that many people also have it, or they believe that, I mean, it was overdone in terms of having him to move around the whole stadium to wave at people and to create some sense of massive endorsement from the whole delegates. People felt that it could have been toned down, especially within the circumstances that we find ourselves. Because, I mean, you need unity, you need everybody on board. You are talking about strengthening the party. And so I am also of the view, like, I mean, the many like-minded concerns that has been raised, that at instances like this, I'm sure we can tone down with some of these promotions. I mean, generally, it could be that it was from a very clear motive from the organizers, because, I mean, what is so wrong if our former vice president and our former flag bearer is going around waving his delegates. But I mean, you are in a party where...
but he is the former vice president of the country and also a key member of your party. What really is wrong with him going around and, you know, exchanging pleasantries with party delegates?
We must also be mindful of where we find ourselves and what can also break us. In the spirit of party revival, party unity, especially where, if you are being very honest to the political realities that we are confronted with, we know that there are other people who may also have similar interests in also vying for the position that I'm sure, God willing, when an opportunity is open, the former vice president also contests for. I am not disputing the fact that he should not be given such or accorded such courtesies and privileges. But the point that I raise is that if other people, other delegates are having concerns that it was overdone to the extent that it's almost taking away the beauty of everything that we did, it is a more reason why I felt that, well, I mean, in going forward, as part of the feedbacks improving, we should also consider the balancing act so that other people do not necessarily feel that we are giving an undue advantage to somebody. I mean, he went to speak, very fantastic speech. And I mean, I felt it should have ended there. But to go around and amid the suspicions that he has the endorsement of A, B, C people, it may not necessarily be so, but it fuels some level of speculations which may not augur well for the strength and the unity that we are all preaching for. But I mean, aside that, I agree everything was good, it was solid.
Were you expecting Kennedy Japan to also have been given the opportunity to speak?
I mean, those decisions doesn't rest on me. I mean, this is on TV. I will not communicate. Even if, I mean, there was such communication that some of these aspirants would be given opportunity, time may not have allowed it. And such decisions goes beyond my pay scale. Obviously, the organizers will make such a decision. But ultimately, the lessons that we have to draw from these feedbacks, which I think we should not be dismissive about them, is that on platforms like this, we must not create an environment that suggests and fuels certain speculations.
Right.
It may not be intentional. It may not necessarily be intentional. But the whole point is that if you hear delegates raising such concerns, remember the delegates that came, they do not all necessarily support one person, one aspirant. Some are with Ken, some are with Dr. Bawumia, some are with Dr. Brian, some are with Dr. Duchum, some are with Engineer Kwabena and all that. I mean, even that.
They were all raising concerns about this particular issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was the feedback that I mean, some of us had from some of these delegates, that yes, very beautiful presentation by the former vice president, but in terms of how the prolongedness of it smacks some intentional promotion, which I mean, it may not
is that what you call engineered optics?
That's what I'm saying. That yes, when people raise such concerns, that I mean, because you see, it may not necessarily also be unfounded. Recall the last 2024 general elections, for instance. We did all the branding, gave good outlook. At the end of the day, they all reflect in the votes that we wanted. So realistically, and at moments like this, at the platform where we are preaching for peace, we are preaching for unity, we are preaching for strengthening of the party, we should avoid giving people basis to think that platforms like that are structured to promote one candidate. It doesn't augur well for anybody.
Okay, we are fortunate. We have your Deputy General Secretary here to respond to this. Was it really orchestrated to benefit a particular candidate, in this case, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia?
Thank you very much. I would say good evening to Kwesi Kwarteng. He's a fantastic communicator. He has represented the party in many occasions, and I can say that he's a very fine gentleman. Kwesi, good evening to you.
Good evening, my brother.
I understand the concern that he's raising, and certainly I will not be dismissive of the concern that you have put through. But I can answer that this was not orchestrated or it was something that was planned. I am a member of the planning committee, secretary to the committee. Indeed, when the former vice president went onto the floor, and if you look at the structure, there are constitutional speeches that are to be made, and also there are other speeches that comes by convention. And he being a former vice president, we have the two former presidents whose speeches would have preceded his speech. And fortunately, one of them could not have the speech, then the other had it. So he being the only person present there, when he entered, he offered to greet. Greeting is a courtesy. And that particular courtesy, you can't stop somebody from greeting. And I can understand that he indicated that when the nominations are open, he will contest. There are other people who also have the mind to contest. But one of the key things that we should all know is that, yes, in every competition, people will feel in one way or the other that somebody is given an advantage. But in these particular circumstances, it is clear that we don't have any contest at all. There is no contest. We have not opened nominations. People can inspire to aspire. People will have the hope of getting the opportunity to lead at a point in time. But we must all at time differentiate times of elections, because when we open nominations for such instances, we would definitely give some rules and regulations. Assuming it was an election conference, assuming it was that we had already opened nominations and were doing this exercise, all the advices that my good brother has presented would have been factored in, because others were legitimately also in that particular shoe or lacing their boot in terms of qualification into a process. So we would have been minded not to allow certain things to happen. When this was offered as a greeting, then the planning committee said that it's a courtesy. Our culture allows greetings. So we should not tamper with the core values, more especially when we said that we're rebuilding the party on our core values, right? So if you are rebuilding on the core values, and one of the core values of our party is respect for hierarchy, respect for tradition, respect for religion, and also competition. So in the era of competition, which is not yet competitive enough because there is no competition at the moment, and we take his advice into consideration.
So you gave Dr. Bawumia the platform because of the fact that he's been a former vice president.
Yeah, he's a former vice president. But he going around was to greet. Greeting is a courtesy.
So why couldn't you extend the same courtesies to people like Dr. Kennedy Japan, for instance?
We wish one day they become president, vice president, and they would be extended those courtesies.
But he supported this particular conference. He donated money.
And that is why we commended him. The General Secretary commended him. And I will use the opportunity here to commend him, because without their contribution, the conference wouldn't have come on. But what happens is that conference always give opportunity to former presidents and former vice president. And I wish one day nobody's turn will be there in perpetuity. There will always definitely be a time. I'm a deputy general secretary today. 3 years ago, it was a very fine lawyer. Okay? 5, 8 years ago, it was somebody. Tomorrow, 2 years, 3 years, I may not be a deputy.
You may become the general secretary of the
NPP. Somebody will be there. So that is how it is. So my brother, I've taken your advice. Right. But I know that myself and you is not a debate. It's just that I'm making clarifications to those matters. We did not give him the opportunity to go around to greet, but he requested to greet because it's a courtesy.
All right. Kwesi Kwarteng, I think that should suffice, right?
Oh, I mean, certainly. There is no grounds for this. And I'm happy how Prof has addressed this concern. I mean, it's not a Kwesi Kwarteng concern. like I indicated, if we are being very mindful to the relatives of members of our party and the delegates around, certainly they are not necessarily loyal to just one person in terms of whether people are aspirants, whether people are being hopeful. I mean, we cannot be dismissive about the fact that there were hopefuls there who, some way or the other, publicly have declared their interest to contest.
Right.
At the end of the day, bottom line is that it becomes a learning curve for the development of our party, so that indeed the unity that we are preaching for, the strengthening of the party, the peace that we are all craving for, we can be able to build a stronger party, a formidable party with everybody involved, and then we all move ahead so that 2028 will be a win for the party. For me, that is more critical.
Thank you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Before we wrap up, now, what next for the party from here?
What is next from here is that we have passed those resolutions. We have put together sunset clauses. The constitution that we have amended takes effect immediately. However, the National Council, per the powers vested in them, set up a 31st January elections for the flag bearer. Many people were asking, as it has been said, what delegates are we going to use for the elections? If you check my conversations, I had always referred back to the Constitution at the time, that once the National Council has so directed and fixed the date per Article 13(1) of the party's Constitution, then when the time is due and there is no amendment, means that the valid delegate at that time will be the delegates for that election.
Okay.
Because their tenure of office hasn't expired. Okay. But in these current circumstances, starting from today, it means that the sunset clause here is that all those additions that have been made, and it requires an election for them to become members or delegates to the conference, their tenure of office will be together with the new when these current ones time of office expire. So it means that before we can add them to, then these current executives or delegates in the polling station and the electoral area, because these are the areas that we have amended that will have election,
right,
including the communication officers, will have to wait until their tenure of office is ended. Then we add that to it. So it means that it will begin from 1st of February, 2026.
So they cannot vote?
They cannot. But those that have been added, who can easily be identified, former MP, who is a card-bearing member, is easy. It doesn't require election. Former MMDC, the identification is easy. It doesn't require elections. Former executives, it doesn't require. So all those ones will be populated and added to the current album for the next election. So the next election, which is 31st January, will have a limited expansion that will include such persons.
Do we, as of now, know the number that you'll be adding to the register? Because sometimes the register becomes an issue in terms of those you'll be adding who will not go through the election.
You know, we have to go back, let our party officers in every constituency to identify based on the categorization by the new amendment. And they will give us that data. The party's IT department will populate and develop the additional album or add on to the current one per the instructions of this party's constitution. You know, this particular motion was also moved and adopted by the National Annual Delegates Conference. And when that is done, we will then use that particular.
When should that be done? Because
I think that immediately, you know, this book will have to be rewritten to include those particular portions. Again, the party hierarchy, in concluding on this matter, will come out with a schedule as to how this is going to be done to conclude all the additions and to be battle ready for the 31st January primaries that is going to come on. Again, what people also had to know is that the MMDCs who have been added, the former executives who have been added, all those persons will only have casting votes for presidential and parliamentary, but not for executive position.
Why that?
Why? Because
delegates are supposed to have all those, right?
There is always a restriction or an endpoint to every power, right? So there is that particular discussion that if you check the MMDCs, they are appointed at the prerogative of the sitting president. Okay? So if I'm a president and I want to take over the party and they are going to participate in the election of party executives, I can appoint 5 or 6 MMDCs for a place and fire them. I can have as many as. So in the period that I would have, I'll be able to accumulate a lot of the executives that I'll be able to change,
to influence
and then get the people elected so that I can control. So they are at the preserve of the president, not the party. The president has the power to. So by way of that particular position, we should allow them because they are coming to serve in government. Parliamentarians has a role in government. The president, the one that is going to be the flag bearer, has the role in government. So they should be part in taking the decision on the presidential and also on the parliamentary. But in the running of the party, we should give that limitation to allow who are holding party positions to take decision on that.
All right.
So if I were to be a former MMD,
nti wo yensama horo timi ko so no so mamna wase so jemre e wo ha da se ne so ba de ndia dum bia dum ye ne ya ye besan ba wuram na ye besom o kwan so kra bera wase so jemre wo ha